Glastonbury fans.
Get Worthy Farm ready.
With me, Annie.
And me, Nick.
And some very special guests.
Join us for weekly bonus episodes bringing you all the action from the world's best festival.
Sidetracked by Glastonbury. Listen first on BBC Sounds.
Wimbledon, where every little detail can make the difference. Unbelievable! All the sounds, all the sights, all the courts.
That's some proper tennis.
With your choice of 18 courts and Ultra HD, get closer to the action.
There's a new king of centre court.
Wimbledon starts Monday on BBC iPlayer.
This is BBC One. We're live from Nottingham. Mishal Husain presents the BBC Prime Ministerial debate.
In 9 days' time, one of the two men standing here will be Prime Minister. Tonight, they go head-to-head. Welcome to the BBC Prime Ministerial debate. Welcome to Nottingham and to Nottingham Trent University, our venue for this debate. With the general election just over a week away, tonight, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are about to spend the next hour and a quarter answering voters' questions. They are the two contenders for Prime Minister. Their positions on this debate stage have been decided by the toss of a coin. They do not know what the questions will be. Those will be coming primarily from our live audience here at the university, who have been chosen by the pollsters Savanta. They include supporters of the Conservatives and of Labour, as well as some undecided voters. And we will also have questions submitted through the BBC's Your Voice, Your Vote website. After 75 minutes of debate, we will have analysis from our spin room, which is also here on the Nottingham Trent campus. And that is where Laura Koonsberg and Clive Myrie will be talking to other politicians and also to fellow journalists. And so, to the leaders, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, welcome to you both. It's very good that you're taking part in this with just over a week to polling day. Welcome. Let us begin straight away with our first question, and it is from Sue Barkley.
People are dismayed by the lack of integrity and honesty in politics today. After the recent allegations about political betting, how would you restore trust in politics?
Thank you very much, Sue, for kicking us off. Now, both of your parties have faced allegations in this regard in recent days. We know of 5 Conservatives being investigated and 1 Labour. Rishi Sunak.
Well, Sue, I completely share your anger. I was as frustrated as you are furious when I learnt about these allegations. That's why, alongside the Gambling Commission, we initiated our own internal inquiries into what had happened, and as a result of that, have suspended 2 candidates. And I've been crystal clear, anyone who has broken the law, broken the rules, should not only face the full consequences of the law, I will ensure that they're booted out of the Conservative Party.
Keir Starmer.
Sue, thank you very much for your question, which I think is on a lot of people's minds, this question of respect and integrity in politics. And you have to lead from the front on issues like this. I think over the last 14 years, politics has become too much about self-entitlement and MPs thinking about what they can get for themselves. And one of the important choices, and the thing that I would like to do if I'm elected Prime Minister, is to reset politics so that politics returns to public service. In relation to these gambling allegations, the instinct of these people to think the first thing they should do is try to make money was the wrong instinct, and we have to change that. But it is also a question of leadership, because this isn't just what's happened this week, last week in the Gambling Commission. We saw Partygate earlier in this Parliament. The Prime Minister himself was convicted and fined for breaking the rules which he brought in and imposed on everybody else. And of course, we've seen what happened with the COVID contracts and the huge amounts of money that were made. This takes leadership. What I did when one of my team was alleged to have been involved and investigated by the Gambling Commission, they were suspended within minutes because I knew it made it really important to be swift. The Prime Minister delayed and delayed and delayed until eventually he was bullied into taking
Rishi
action.
Sunak,
If you're going to
there are
change
a lot
the
of
culture,
let me
you have
get
to
a
start at the
response.
top.
Let me get a response, Keir Starmer, to those accusations.
Well, it was
Rishi Sunak.
important to me that, given the seriousness and the sensitivity of the matters at hand, that they were dealt with properly. And that's what I've done. We had an independent internal inquiry into what happened, have taken action and suspended the candidates involved, and I've been crystal clear that they should face the full consequences of the law. But Keir Starmer talks about leadership in politics. That's what Sue's question was at, was a broad question about how to do that. I also think leadership means being straight with people. It means having the courage of your convictions, not changing your mind on every single position that you've taken and being upfront about what you want to do for the country. That's not what Keir Starmer is doing. He's not being honest with everyone about his plans to raise their taxes.
Right,
I think that will erode trust in politics, and that's the choice at this election.
Let's just stick to the heart of the question, first of all, because it was sparked by the recent allegations about political betting, and Sue asked how you would restore trust in politics. So if you've acted now on those to withdraw support from those two Conservative candidates, what did you find in that investigation?
Well, Mishal, you know there's an independent investigation which is ongoing, which is why I can't say anything further about that. You will understand that. But when we had our internal inquiries, when we found things that were not appropriate, I took action and suspended the candidates. I've been crystal clear. I was furious to hear about these things. That's why I've dealt with it. But the choice of this election is about, as Sue said, it's about leadership, it's about integrity in politics, and that's a question about doing what you say. You know, the Keir Starmer's made this broader point, but the point is, he's changed his mind on every major position that he's taken. Absolutely. He doesn't have the courage of his convictions and is not being straight with everybody now about his plans, if he wins power, to raise people's taxes. That's not going to do anything to restore trust in politics, and that's a choice for everyone at this election. Continue tax cuts with the Conservatives, or Keir Starmer's tax rises, which he is not being straight with everyone about.
Again, to return to the question, Keir Starmer, the Labour candidate from whom you've withdrawn support, appears to have betted on losing his own election. Do you know if any other candidate has placed similar bets in this campaign?
Well, he was, as you say, investigated by the Gambling Commission because he bet on himself to lose. As soon as the Commission said they were investigating, I suspended him. And I've made very clear to my candidates that I expect high standards in politics. I said last week that the Prime Minister should have taken decisive action. And I said last week, should one of my candidates be investigated by the Commission, then they would be suspended and their feet wouldn't leave the floor. And that's what I did. And so my candidates know I expect the highest standards and that I'll take decisive action if they fall below those standards. Because I am, back to Sue's point, I'm absolutely determined to return politics to public service.
Do you know that none of your other candidates have placed similar bets?
Important for our country.
Do you know that none of your other candidates have placed similar bets?
Well, I've made clear to my candidates what the standards are, and they've seen by my actions what the consequences are if they fall short of those standards. But the Prime Minister hides behind a process. He could have taken decisive action last week, even the week before, but he eventually got round to it when he was bullied by other people into doing it. That's not leadership, and he talks about integrity. I'm sorry, when you get convicted for breaking the COVID rules, which you imposed on the rest of the country, you really shouldn't be talking about integrity in politics.
Rishi Sunak?
Well, leadership means being straight with people about what you plan to do. I've set out my plans clearly, and I appreciate, actually, that not everyone's going to agree with me on everything, but at least you know where I stand. Now, Keir Starmer is not being straight with you about his plans to raise your taxes. I don't think that's leadership. I don't think that people should surrender their family finances to the Labour Party, and that's the choice for people at this election.
Well, let me just address that, if I may, because we have set out in our manifesto all of our plans. They're fully funded, they're fully costed, and we've set out that we will not be increasing income tax, national insurance or VAT. What the Prime Minister is doing, he's got a manifesto that's got promises to you and everybody watching which are unfunded because his Chancellor has said that the money he's relying on has already been spent. Now, that is the mistake that Liz Truss made. That's what cost so many people so much across this country, and now we've got to repeat unfunded commitments, lots of promises, promises, but where's the money coming from? The Chancellor himself has said the money was spent last year, it isn't available. And if there's 5 more years of this, we're going to have the same as we've got now, a cost of living crisis bearing down on people across this country, really struggling because the economy is broken. And this is the chance at this election to turn the page and start to rebuild our country with a stable economy.
Okay.
Well, Michelle, just to build on it, what the Chancellor did this morning was ask his opposite number, Keir Starmer's Shadow Chancellor, to rule out raising all your taxes beyond what they've already announced in the first budget. And the Shadow Chancellor wasn't able to do that today. That's what the Chancellor did today. But you don't have to listen to me. Just go online, go to the Telegraph website, because we've just found a recording that they have put out there from the Deputy Chancellor from the Labour Party admitting that their plans will cost hundreds of billions of pounds.
I'm just going to explain something to anyone who hasn't seen this today.
That is going to cost all of you thousands of pounds of tax rises. That's why I say Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are not being straight with you. So do not surrender to their tax rises.
Let me just explain. This is a reference to Darren Jones, the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, one of your senior Treasury team, who in a recording given to the Daily Telegraph has said decarbonising the British economy will cost hundreds of billions of pounds.
We've set out in our manifesto what we want to do to go to renewable energy, and we've set out how much that will cost, exactly how much is going to be put in, and we've got a column saying how that's going to be funded. Yes, it is absolutely right that we want to get in investors to come alongside that government money. And we've been talking, you won't be surprised by this, to global investors for the best part of 2 years to say that if we put down this money set out in our manifesto, will you come alongside it and put down many more billions of pounds so that in partnership with the government we can make the change that we need?
Hang on.
No, let me just finish this.
I'm sure we're going to come back to the same thing later on.
This is your own Shadow Chancellor.
If you don't mind, I'm going to get to the next question.
Just be straight with people.
There are people waiting.
How many hundreds is it?
Is it 200? I'm going to turn to the next question now.
Is it 400?
I think the Prime Minister must have put a bet on how many times he's going to interrupt me.
I do want to turn to the next question because lots of people are waiting and they've got important questions that they would like answers to. If you can hear any noises off, ladies and gentlemen, or anyone at home, there is a protest taking place outside, which is also an aspect of our democracy and people exercising their freedom of speech. Our next question here comes from Mary Armstrong.
Evening. I've worked 2 jobs since I was 18 and I'm now 60. And I think too many people don't understand how important and better it is for you to be working hard. I also think too many people are on out-of-work benefits. My question is, what are you going to do to help more people to come off benefits and back into work?
Mary, thank you very much for that. Keir Starmer, what are you going to do to get more
Mary,
people off work, off benefits and into work?
Yeah, can I first agree with you that work is, of course, about pay and being able to pay your own way and, support your family. But it is also about dignity and respect. And my dad worked in a factory all his life. He was a tool maker. And having a secure job for him was really important to his respect and integrity. In relation to those that are out of work, my rule is this: if you can work, you should work. And we've got a plan to get people into work, working with businesses to support people in. I think we need to change the job centre and the careers service, because at the moment, when I ask businesses, if you have a vacancy, are you going to the job centre to get that vacancy filled? They say they're not, so we need to do that. The other thing, Mary, that we absolutely need to do is to get the waiting lists down in the NHS, because very many people aren't able to work or to work in the way they want because they're waiting for an operation because of the catastrophic level of waiting lists under this government.
So let's hear your first response, Rishi Sunak, to Mary's question. So, what are you going to do to get people off benefits?
Mary, there's a clear choice for you and everyone who believes like you do the situation isn't right. Because if you want lower taxes and lower welfare, that's what I'll deliver. If you want higher taxes and higher welfare, that's what Keir Starmer will do. So I strongly agree that people are better off in work. It's not just for the financial security it brings you, it's about the purpose, the dignity that it brings to people, which you alluded to, and I strongly agree with. The number of people currently out of work on ill health and disability benefits is too high. It's gone up by 800,000 since the pandemic. It's gone up by 60%, the bill, in the last few years. We've got to do something about that. I made a speech about this a few months ago. I set out a comprehensive plan to reform the welfare system, to tighten it up so that those who can work do work. We're stricter about those eligibility criteria. That's fair for all of you who are working hard paying your taxes. It's better for those people, and that's what I'll do. But when I announced that, and just again recently, Keir Starmer and the Labour Party opposed every single thing that I set out to deliver what you want. Every single thing. They do not think that you can save a single penny in the growing welfare bill. Okay. That's what their numbers show. That's what they've said. So the choice for you is clear. If you want lower welfare and lower taxes, I will deliver that for you. Higher taxes and higher welfare is what you will get with Keir Starmer.
We actually have a related question, so I'm going to bring in Beverly McKenzie now.
I've worked all my life, but had to stop due to illness. Disabled people like me get hit in the worst way when we want to get back to work and help, but often we can't. How will candidates ensure we're not punished by benefit sanctions?
Thank you very much. Rishi Sunak, so you've said you'd tighten the system, you'd be stricter. What does that mean for people like Beverly?
Yeah, sorry, what was, I couldn't quite hear. Is it Beverly?
Yeah. Beverly.
Yeah, Beverly, look, I actually believe in a compassionate welfare system that supports everyone who genuinely needs it. And you saw me do that during COVID, making sure that we got support to the most vulnerable. Right? That will always happen under a Conservative government, always happen under me. But what we won't do is have a system where people are not supported into work if they can work. So what we're going to do is make sure that we reform the fit note, sick note process, which isn't working. It's signing far too many people off as not fit for work. We're going to look at, when you asked about benefits and sanctions, we're going to provide active support for people into work. But I also think that if people have been offered jobs that they can do and that they don't take them, then that's not okay. So after 12 months, what I've said is we will do something about that. If your job coach says to you, look, there's work that you can do, that everyone agrees you can do, there's a job for you that you're fit enough and well enough to do, and you refuse to take it, I don't think that's fair on everyone else after 12 months of support. So we will tighten that up. I think that's fair for everybody, because fundamentally I think that those people who can work should work. That's, I think, a fundamental tenet of fairness in our system, which most people will agree with. That's why I think we can save money in the welfare bill, because it's forecast to grow at an extraordinary rate over the next few years.
Starmer,
and I want to use that money to support people
Starmer, just
and
one
to
second.
cut your taxes.
What is wrong, if you believe it is wrong, what Rishi Sunak is saying, that if someone is offered a job and they can do that job and they turn it down, that's wrong?
No, there's nothing wrong with that, and I just want to address Beverly's point.
You opposed it when I announced it. You literally opposed it.
If you listen to people in the audience across the country more often, you might not be quite so out of touch. Beverly, can I just address the point you make? Because it's a really important point, which is very many people with illness or disability do want to get back into work for the very reason that was alluded to before, the respect, the dignity, and the support that it gives them. But it's difficult to do so because they're worried about whether they can do it and whether they'll last a period of months. So what a number of firms are doing, businesses, and I've been to see this myself, and I support this, is having a supported scheme where people can be supported back into work for a number of months to make sure they can make that transition and get back into work. I think that's a really good scheme. That's what we would put into place. But I do have to address this question. The Prime Minister keeps saying he's going to cut taxes. He has raised tax 26 times. Nobody's raised more tax than this Prime Minister.
This is not a question about tax. This is a question about getting people back to work. So the numbers have risen considerably since the COVID pandemic. The numbers of people economically inactive due to long-term sickness has risen to 2.8 million. So how would you are seeking power, what would you get those numbers down to through the approach you're talking about?
We want to get the numbers right down. We want to, with a plan to get people back into work. Partly that's supported. Partly it's the changes that we want to make to the job centres to make sure that where businesses and public services, the NHS doesn't go to the job centre when it's got vacancies. They should do, so we want to merge those two services. But the other thing, if we're going to get people back into work, is we have to tackle these terrible waiting lists, because nearly 8 million people are on the waiting list. And so it's not their fault that they can't get back into work. It's the fault of the government that's put us in this terrible position. We have to address these
fundamentally, there's a very clear choice and there's a very clear dividing line. I think you've got to change the eligibility criteria in the welfare system. You've got to make it clear that people who can work should work. That means looking at all the gateways we have and actually being more rigorous about asking people to provide medical information when they're making these claims, reforming the sick note process, being stricter about saying to people who don't accept a job after 12 months that that's not okay. Those are all the practical things that I've set out. I think that's fair. Now, Keir Starmer can stand here tonight and say what he wants. When I made that speech, and you can all go and read it and see what they said, they opposed every single measure. Just 2 weeks ago, they were asked about it. They said, we oppose all those measures. So it's one thing to stand here and say all these things. You should at least be upfront with people. You don't think my approach is the right one. You are going to have higher welfare under you, and that's why you can't deliver tax cuts the way that I can. And people should not surrender to this.
The Prime Minister says he's going to do all these things. They've been in power for 14 years. Why has he only just thought of this with a week to go before the general election? Honestly, if there's that much wrong with the system, who's the guy in charge of the system over the last 14 years? Why is it so bad?
Well, you want to be in charge, but you've got nothing to say to people about what you would do about it. This election is about the future.
Will the welfare bill be higher under you, Keir Starmer?
No, it needs to come down. It needs to come down by getting people back into work with a clear plan, and it needs to come down by tackling the waiting lists so that more people can get back into work, which is why one of the first things that we will do if we're elected in to serve our country, serve being the word I choose, is to put in place 40,000 extra appointments, NHS appointments, each and every week. That's 2 million a year to drive down those waiting lists, to give people the comfort and operations that they need, and to allow them to get back into the economy so that we can grow the economy, which is the thing that's been missing so desperately over the last 14 years.
What Keir Starmer's not telling you is actually most of the people who we're talking about, who Sue asked about originally, aren't on an NHS waiting list. So talking about that isn't an answer to this problem.
Nearly 8 million.
The answer to this problem is actually being stricter about the eligibility criteria, making sure that everyone who can work does work, because that's fair to everyone like Sue, who is working very hard and putting in. That's what I will do. I promise you I will deliver on it. We will cut the welfare bill, the growth in the welfare bill. It is unsustainable. We spend too much on it. I set out a plan to do so. Labour oppose all of it. So the choice for you is simple. If you want higher taxes and higher welfare, that's what Keir Starmer will do. If you want lower taxes and lower welfare, that's what I will do. Do not surrender to our welfare system to the Labour Party and Keir Starmer.
I'm going to turn to our next question on that note, and this one comes from Steve Curtis.
Good evening, all. We're an island. Why can't we easily close our borders?
Thank you, Steve, for that question. Keir Starmer.
Steve, the biggest threat to our borders at the moment is the very many people arriving by small boat over the Channel. And there are record numbers. Since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, 50,000 people have come across by small boat. And the government has effectively lost control of our borders. And that means it's not just a border security issue, it's actually a national security issue, because the government's lost control of who's coming and what their background is. Now, I think that nobody but nobody should be making that journey across the Channel. And we have to smash the gangs that are running this vile trade. There are gangs that are making a fortune, putting people into boats across the Channel, an absolute fortune. And I think they can be taken down. And Steve, before I was a politician, I was the chief prosecutor for England and Wales. So I ran all criminal prosecutions in England and Wales, in all of our criminal courts. And we had to deal with terrorist plots and other plots, drug plots, and gun plots, which were across various other countries. We grouped together with police and law enforcement across Europe, and we took down those terrorist gangs. I've seen it done. I've been part of the operations to do it. I do not accept, I will never accept, that the only gangs that apparently can't be taken down are the gangs that are putting vulnerable people in boats.
Because we haven't heard from him yet on Steve's question, which was, we're an island, why can't we easily close our borders?
Steve, you're right to highlight the issue. It's completely unfair what's happening. When people come here illegally, jump the queue, it not only puts pressure on public services, it not only threatens our security, It's an affront to that sense of fairness, which is fundamental to our national character, and that's why I've made it a priority to stop the boats. We have made progress. The numbers have come down over the past 12 months compared to the 12 months before. But in order to fully solve this problem, you need a deterrent. We need to make it crystal clear to people that if they come to our country illegally, they won't be able to stay. And that's why, if I'm your Prime Minister on July 5th, the flights will go to Rwanda. We will build that deterrent that multiple other European countries now agree is the right way to deal with this problem, and that's how we solve this problem. If Keir Starmer is your Prime Minister, all those illegal migrants will be out on our streets, and that is the choice for you. Do not surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
Steve, this is complete and utter nonsense.
On the numbers, Keir Starmer, just one moment. Just one moment. I want to clarify something. Small boat arrivals did come down last year, but arrivals so far this year are at a record high. It's more than 13,000 people. Have you lost control, as Keir Starmer has said?
No. The numbers have come down over the past 12 months, as you acknowledge.
Right.
Michelle, but the way to solve this problem is to have a deterrent. And look, I will tell you this. The Rwanda plan is a deterrent. You just have to listen to what the illegal migrants themselves are saying. One of them just said, most of us are still in France due to the fear we have about Rwanda. Another one said, I won't cross the channel until the Rwanda plan is destroyed. If Labour win, the people smugglers are going to need a bigger boat. Don't surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
You would scrap the Rwanda plan.
Record numbers have come under this Prime Minister's watch. Record numbers coming across the channel. And he says it's a deterrent. There are a few hundred that would go on a flight to Rwanda at huge expense to the taxpayer. There are tens of thousands. 50,000 people have come since Rishi Sunak has been Prime Minister. 50,000 across the channel. A few hundred going every year means there's a 99% chance you're not going to Rwanda. Now, I've worked with criminal gangs, Rishi Sunak. I know that they are telling the people they're exploiting there's a 99% chance of not going to Rwanda. That is not a disincentive. That is not a deterrent, and it's not working. If it were working, why are record numbers still coming under your watch, Prime Minister? How on earth can you say it's working? You put the scheme in place. The flights could go off. I noticed you called the election, by the way, before any flights could actually get off, and it could be tested. An interesting timing. But if this was such a deterrent, why is it obviously not working?
You spent all this time when I first got this job saying call an election, call an election. Then when we call election, you spend all your time saying why did you call an election? This is about the future. I can tell everyone what I'm going to do with illegal migrants who come to our country. They will be on planes, be sent away because they shouldn't be here. What will you do with the illegal migrants that arrive to the UK? What will you do with them? You've had 3 weeks to think of an answer. What is it?
We've got tens of thousands of people here who've come unlawfully. The Prime Minister says he'll send them all to Rwanda. The Rwanda scheme takes a few hundred. It would take literally 300 years to get all the people who are here unlawfully to Rwanda. So they're going to stay here.
If elected, what would you do?
What would you do with them?
So at the moment, they're not being processed. So they're sitting in hotels, which you are all paying for. They're not processed, and as a result of not being processed, that means not a single one, even those that shouldn't be here, can be returned anywhere. So once they've got here under the Prime Minister's scheme, they're here for life. That's an absurd situation to have got into. So, yes, we do need to process
But what will you do with them?
We've got to process the claim. You're sitting there with tens of thousands of people. But just
when
let me finish.
illegal migrants come to our country, what will you do with them?
Processed their claims.
It's a very simple question.
Well,
I can tell people what I will do with them. I will put them on planes to Rwanda because they shouldn't be able to stay. What will you do with illegal migrants who come to our country? What will you do with them? It's a simple question.
His plan is
What will you do with them?
They need to be processed at the moment.
Processed?
They're not... These
which
claims
means
are not being
which,
processed.
to be clear, will mean most of them will be given asylum. They will get the right to remain in this country.
At the moment, 100% of them are effectively being granted asylum in this country because they can't go anywhere. They can't go anywhere. They cannot... The Prime Minister knows this, and if he thinks I'm wrong, he should say so. Because they're not being processed, they cannot be returned to where they came from. Can they, Prime Minister? If he wants to correct that, now's his chance to do it. They cannot be returned.
About where we'll answer. Well, do you know where these people come from?
No, he's not answering the question.
Do you know where they come from? Iran,
you can see.
Syria, Afghanistan. So when Keir Starmer says he's going to return people, is he going to sit down? Are you going to sit down with the Iranian ayatollahs? Are you going to try and do a deal with the Taliban? It's completely nonsensical what you are saying, right? You are taking I mean, you are taking people for fools, right? I think that these people should not stay in our country. They will be on planes to Rwanda. That's what I will do with them. You still can't answer the question. What will you do with them?
Send all the tens of thousands?
All illegal migrants who arrive will be processed and put on planes to Rwanda.
50,000. Is that the scheme?
That is the choice for you.
50,
if you think illegal migrants should not be in our country, they should be sent somewhere else to build the deterrent, I will deliver for that for you. Do not surrender our borders to Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. This situation will just get worse. We will become the soft touch of Europe. And as I said the other night, they are queuing up in Calais waiting for a Keir Starmer to be in charge.
Boats.
So you will send tens of thousands of people who are here and out of the asylum system at the moment. You are promising to send them all to Rwanda.
We will have a number of flights from July through to build this deterrent. That's what I've always said. The principle here is I don't think people who come here should be able to stay. But look, Keir, you talk about this as if you care about the issue, but this is when you ran for the Labour leadership, which wasn't very long ago, you promised to protect free movement. You said you would close. You promised to close detention centres for illegal migrants, and you boasted in that letter of getting illegal migrants more welfare. Like, that's what you actually believe, and that's why you can't trust him on this issue. So I say it again, do not surrender our borders to the Labour Party.
I'm very clear that what we need to do here, we need to get our security of our borders back. They've lost control. 50,000 people have come. We've got to smash the gangs that are doing this in the first place.
Smash the gangs. You know what? I really want to address this, Mishal. We passed a law in Parliament. People have their own mind, right? You're right. We do have to smash the gangs. What does that mean? We passed a law in Parliament. We passed new laws so that our law enforcement agencies could use them. You know what? They've arrested 1,000 criminals and people smugglers. They've sentenced them to hundreds of years, exactly as you would expect us to do. That's what we did. Do you know what? The Labour Party voted against that law. So when you stand there and say smash the gangs, like on every other issue, you say one thing, you do another, you just don't know which Keir Starmer you're going to get. You can't trust him on this issue. Do not surrender our borders to him.
This is the difference between me and the Prime Minister. Before I did this job, I was running the Crown Prosecution Service. I was the Director of Public Prosecution. And it was my responsibility to take down criminal gangs on behalf of everybody in this room, everybody watching, to protect the country. So I know that this can be done. You share the data, the analysis, the intelligence. You have to have a strategy to arrest everybody at exactly the same time. You need to know what evidence is going to be used in which court, where, and which country is going to have the lead on the prosecution. We did it to take down really dangerous terrorist gangs. There was one terrorist gang that involved bringing down 9 planes in the Atlantic at the same time with bombs. That was one of the cases that I had to deal with as a prosecution.
It's a very different kind of threat, isn't it?
No, but these were very sophisticated terrorist gangs.
The question was about
I don't accept this can't be done for the gangs that are running this wild trade.
There are criminals and people smugglers that are spending hundreds of years in our jails because of the laws that the Conservatives passed. When it came to it, the Labour Party opposed those laws. They voted against it. So when he's standing here before you tonight saying, yes, he cares about this, he's going to do about this, just look at his record. This is someone who defended free movement. He campaigned against the deportation of foreign criminals. He can't be trusted on this issue. Do not surrender our borders to him.
Thank you both for your responses. And I'm going to turn now to our next question, which comes from Mohammed Mubarak Sheikh.
Hi. You have both made lots of promises, but you haven't set out a clear plan to pay for those promises. Where is the money going to come from?
You've both made lots of promises. You haven't set out a clear plan to pay for those promises. Where is the money going to come from, Rishi Sunak?
Well, actually, we talked about it, Mohammed, in Sue's question. I think it's right that we make savings from the welfare bill because it's forecast to grow at an unsustainable rate. I don't think that's right. I don't think that's fair. Set out a comprehensive plan. You can go and have a look at it online. And those savings we will use to cut your taxes. And what I want to do is cut taxes for people at every stage of their life. So for everyone in work, we're going to continue cutting national insurance, £900 this year. For pensioners, we have the Triple Lock Plus. We will raise the allowance, delivering a tax cut for pensioners, making sure that the state pension is never subject to income tax. If you're a young couple wanting to buy your first home, we're effectively going to abolish stamp duty. If you have children, you're a family, we're going to expand the generosity of child benefit. Right? These are the tax cuts that I want to deliver. And if you're a small business owner and entrepreneur, we're going to abolish national insurance for the self-employed. So those are the tax cuts. That's how we're going to pay for it. And that's the choice for you at this election. You can have tax cuts with the Conservatives, or you can have thousands of pounds of tax rises under the Labour Party, because he's simply not being straight with you about what is coming. Mark my words, your taxes are going up if he is in charge.
Keir Starmer.
False, but Mohammed, I'll answer your question. Everything in our manifesto so we've set out all of our plans. It's a manifesto for growing our economy, for creating wealth, to make sure our country is better off and that everybody within the country is better off. It's got clear columns setting out how much each of our plans is going to cost, and then a column saying where that money is going to come from, so that everything is fully costed and fully funded. We've got very strong fiscal rules because we want economic stability, which is what we've been missing in recent years. And the reason for that, Mohammed, because this is really, really important, is that we know what happens if unfunded tax cuts are made, because Liz Truss tried that experiment on the country. And we're all paying the price for that. And when she was elected as leader of the Conservative Party, Rishi Sunak said we should unite behind her. I don't think we should unite behind her. I think we should learn the lessons, which is why I'm not prepared to allow an incoming Labour government ever to inflict that kind of damage on people across the country, because people are still paying the price. Many people on a mortgage now, who've come off a fixed-rate mortgage, are now paying hundreds of pounds more because of the damage done to the economy. But Rishi Sunak hasn't learnt the lesson, because his manifesto has got commitments in there that are unfunded, because his Chancellor has said that the money he says he's going to use has already been spent. And everybody knows you can't spend the same money twice. So you're going to go round, if we have 5 more years of this, we're going to go round and round in circles.
Yes,
we're going to end up exactly where we are.
Just before you respond, because each of you had a say on that, just before you respond, I'm going to make clear that Mohammed's not alone in thinking that neither of you have set out a clear plan to pay for your promises. The IFS think tank said this week that you are both your parties are ignoring raw facts, and that huge decisions need to be made, which in all likelihood will mean either higher taxes or worse public services.
Well, actually, the IFS also said that it's right to identify welfare as a challenge that needs to be addressed, and the IFS also acknowledged that when the Conservatives previously set out savings that they would get from the welfare bill, the IFS didn't think it would happen, and in fact they were delivered, and I'm sure BBC Verify will put that quote on their website. But look, 2 years ago, I warned repeatedly about what Liz Truss's economic policies would do to our country, even if it wasn't what people wanted to hear at the time. I was right then. And that's why you can trust me now. That's why you can trust me now when I say that the Labour Party's policies will mean all your taxes are going to go up by thousands of pounds. It is in their DNA. Mark my words. Your pension, your council tax, your home, your car, you name it, they will tax it, which is why he cannot rule out raising your taxes. He's been asked multiple times, will he change the council tax bans? He won't rule it out. I'll ask him again, but I'm going to tell you, do not surrender your family finances to Labour's tax rises.
Let me address this directly, because the Prime Minister said he warned the country about Liz Truss and the damage that she was going to do to our economy. And then, in the next breath, he said we must unite behind her and support her. Why on earth would you unite behind someone that you say was going to do that damage?
You know what it's like to fall in behind a leader of your party.
But he's repeating the problem. He's repeating the problem. He said unite behind her. She's one of his candidates. And his election pitch to you seems to be, my predecessor, a Tory Prime Minister, broke the country, did huge economic damage, please vote Tory. Now, you're going to have to decide whether that's persuasive. He's now openly admitting the damage that the Tories have done to the economy and saying, please vote for him.
No,
that's the last thing we need in this country after the damage that's been done.
When it comes to the economy, I was right then. And since I've been your Prime Minister, inflation is back to normal, the economy's growing faster than our competitors, wages are rising, energy bills are falling, we've started cutting your taxes, and I will keep cutting your taxes. That is my pitch to you. That's a choice at this election. Their taxes that he wants to put up on you are coming. He won't rule out revaluing your council tax bans. Every pensioner that is watching should realise that under a future Labour government, for the first time in our country's history, the state pension will be subject to a retirement tax under Labour. That's what their plans are. Those are the numbers, black and white. We're not going to do that. We're going to have the triple lock plus. But for the millions of pensioners that are watching, be very worried, because you're going to face a retirement tax under the Labour Party.
Just don't insult people by putting out falsehoods. You mentioned the IFS.
Which one's the fault?
He keeps saying we're going to raise taxes.
Sorry, can you confirm?
He obviously has put a bet on interrupting me, hasn't he?
Will the state pension be subject to income tax under a future Labour government? The only way for it not is for you to match our triple lock plus. So maybe you can change policy here tonight. Will you match our triple lock plus and ensure that state pension is never subject to income tax?
Yes
or no?
The position on the state pension that we've set out is exactly...
It's a yes or no.
Hang on, we need to hear this response.
I think you should show some respect to the audience who want to know what I've got to say about this without constantly being interrupted. It really isn't the way to do the debate.
What's the answer to the question about whether you'll match what they're going to do on pensions?
The position on pensioners and tax, or pensions on tax, that we've set out is exactly the same. It is the position of the government at their last budget. It is their position. The Prime Minister now says, oh, I'm going to change that. I'm going to change all that. When asked where the money is coming from, his Chancellor says the money is being spent, it isn't there. That is making the same mistake again. Can I just address the IFS point, though, because I think that is really important.
If you're a pensioner, you should know there is a retirement tax coming for you, capital R, capital T, if he is your Prime Minister.
He can promise
for the first time in our
20
country's
tax
history,
cuts. He can't tell us how
are going
he's
to be paying tax because he won't match our triple lock plus. If I'm your Prime Minister, that won't happen, and that's what I'll deliver for you. As I say it again, do not surrender your finances to their tax rises.
If you've got a very brief response, then I want to go to the next question.
Well, pensioners are not going to be better off with the Prime Minister who's making promises that he can't keep because they're not funded. That's exactly what Liz Truss got wrong. We cannot... There's one thing that we cannot repeat at this election. Please do not go back to Liz Truss Mark II with this Prime Minister, because the same damage will follow. If you can't say...
It is funded.
We're going to end this particular topic here.
The reason you can't fund it is because you think that you can't make a single penny.
We've still got lots of topics to get through, so I'm going to turn to the next question.
That's why I can.
Thank you. This next question is from Karen Duran.
Good evening. I'm a children's nurse at a local hospital. I see families affected by libraries and children's centres closing. How will you help councils after Nottingham City Council has effectively gone bankrupt?
Thank you, Karen. And the council here has been run by Labour since 1991. Keir Starmer.
Yes, and I'm very concerned about the situation, because I think anybody looking at a council which has run out of money is concerned about the basic services, whether it's libraries or other support that councils have to put in place. And this is a position for councils of all political stripes. There are Conservative-run councils that have struggled for money and gone bankrupt as well because of the lack of adequate and proper structured funding from the government. You asked what we would do about it, and I think it is important for us to set out what we would do if we came into office. We would change the way the payments are made to councils. At the moment, council leaders are saying they're made on a yearly basis, so we can't make the most effective use of the money that's available to us. If they're on a longer term, we could make much better use of that. Secondly, they're saying if you could do what the Conservatives promised but didn't actually do, which is to stop no-fault evictions, that would have a massive help for councils as well. Because when people lose their home through no fault of their own, quite a lot of them end up having to have support of a local authority. I don't think you should have no-fault evictions. I think we should actually get on and get rid of them. That's what the Prime Minister used to say, but he doesn't do it.
On your point about council funding, a multi-year funding plan doesn't give more money necessarily, does it? So are you saying there is more money that would come to local authorities under a Labour government?
If you go for a 3-year settlement, it means the available money can be used better, because any council leader will tell you that trying to make the best use of the money within the constraints of a 12-month period doesn't work. So it's better use of existing money. But look, I'm not going to stand here and say there's some magic wand that I can wave the day after the election and find money that isn't there. Huge damage has been done to our economy. It is going to take time. That's why our manifesto is a manifesto for growing our economy, for creating wealth, to making sure that we can make sure all of our public services, whether that's councils or others, are properly funded, providing the services that people expect and actually, frankly, deserve, which is not the case at the moment.
Let's get Rishi Sunak's response. How will you help councils after Nottingham City Council has effectively gone bankrupt?
Karen, my first job in government was being local government minister, so I was responsible for councils, and they do an extraordinary job. And much as people focus on national politics, actually, most politics is local. It's what's happening in your street, your neighbourhood, your community, and the services that you mentioned are so important, particularly those that concern families and children. One of the things that I do want to do is actually roll out family hubs, as we've been doing over the past few years, which are special places where whole families can come and get the advice and support they need, particularly the most vulnerable families. Look, and in terms of funding councils, we've recently announced just over £500 million of extra funding for councils, particularly for social care, which is where some of the big pressures are in children's services, which you alluded to, and we'll continue to work with councils to provide them the support they need. But you mentioned Nottingham, right? And that is a glimpse of the future, right? Nottingham City Council bankrupt under Labour. Birmingham City Council, the largest council in the country, in fact, the largest in Europe, not just bankrupt, but as a result, everyone in Birmingham is now paying a 20% higher council tax bill. And that is a snapshot of what will happen if Keir Starmer is in power and across the country. As Labour always do, they run out of everyone's money, they bankrupt the economy in 2010, they bankrupted Birmingham, they bankrupted Nottingham, and that's why everyone in Birmingham is paying a 20% higher council tax. So that is just an appetizer of the higher taxes that are going to come under a future Labour government. Do not surrender your local council and our finances to them.
Okay. Councils like Woking and Thurrock were Conservative when similar problems first emerged.
What do you say about that? Conservative councils in exactly the same problem. What do you say about that? And I have to say, a Prime Minister gloating about the fact that councils are struggling and the impact that you know
higher council tax.
He's responsible.
You have to believe me, you can go and check as a result of their financial mismanagement. Right? The same thing happened in Nottingham, right? That's what you get with the Labour Party. You remember what happened last time they were in office. They run out of your money, they bankrupt the country, and you all pay for it in higher taxes. And that is the choice for you at this election. Right? We are making progress. The economy is growing. Taxes are now coming down. The financial security that you want, I can deliver. But if we put all that progress at risk with them, your family finances are going to get hammered. Your taxes are going to get whacked up. And that is the choice for you at this election. Do not surrender to their tax rises.
Okay, thank you both. Just before we get to the next question, I'm going to remind everyone watching that we have got more questions coming in this Prime Ministerial debate, but online on the BBC live page, you'll be able to see what BBC Verify are already doing. They're already fact-checking and assessing the claims made here, and will continue to do so throughout the time we are on air. Our next question is from Robert Blackstock.
Good evening, gentlemen. Mr. Sunak, I think you made a fair job of being Chancellor, but you're a pretty mediocre Prime Minister. Sir Keir, I think that your strings are being pulled by very senior members of the Labour Party. Are you two really the best we've got to be the next Prime Minister of our great country?
Rishi Sunak.
Well, Rob, look, I can understand your frustration, everyone's frustration, because the last few years have not been easy. We've dealt with a lot as a country. I'm not saying we've got everything right. I certainly would be the first to acknowledge that. But I've been your Prime Minister for 18 months. And in that time, we've got inflation down from 11% with all the damage it was doing to the cost of living back to target. The economy in the first quarter of this year, fastest growing in the G7. Wages rising faster than prices for almost a year now. And my primary job was to deliver that economic stability so I could start cutting your taxes. That is the journey we're now on. So whatever your other frustrations, the choice for you at this election is about the future. If you want lower taxes, if you want your borders secure, as Steve was asking before, if you want a sensible approach to net zero, if you want your pension protected with a triple lock plus, that is what I will do for you. Right? This is a serious election with consequences for you and your family. I get the frustrations, but think about the choice. Allow me to finish the job I've started, cut your taxes, protect your pension, secure our borders. Because if Keir Starmer and the Labour Party are in charge, your taxes are going up, our borders are going to be insecure, you're going to be saddled with bills as he reverses my net zero changes, and every pensioner is going to face a retirement tax for the first time in history. And that is the choice that you should have in your mind.
Keir Starmer.
Robert, earlier in my career, I worked in Northern Ireland with the police in Northern Ireland as part of the work out of the Good Friday Agreement. And with a team, I set out to change the police service in Northern Ireland to make sure it gained the confidence of all communities in Northern Ireland, which was a really important part of the peace process. So I went, I said what we would do, and we delivered. I then ran the Crown Prosecution Service for 5 years with 7,000 staff. I said we would improve the way we dealt with violence against women and girls. I said we'd do it, we made the change, and we got on with it, and we made that change, and it was more successful at the end. I came into the Labour Party to lead it 4.5 years ago, and I said we will change our party to make sure that we are a party that can put a credible proposition before the country for changing the country, and that will always say, country first, party second. I've been there, I've done it, I've changed it. What I'm now asking for is the opportunity to change our country for the better, because we've had 14 pretty awful years. 14 years when I think most people would say we've ended up now with almost everything not working very well, worse than it was 14 years ago when this government came in. Most people not feeling better off. And this is a choice election, because if we go on for another 5 years of this under Rishi Sunak, that is not going to change. That isn't going to change. So this is the opportunity to turn the page, to rebuild our country, rebuild our public services, rebuild our economy, and make sure that we can genuinely say to ourselves we're a better country, better run, proper public services, and people feel better off. Now, I've done that sort of change throughout my life, and I'm asking for the opportunity to now do it for the country.
I'm just going to come back to the question, because I suspect that Robert Blackstock knows your background. He certainly knows that you've been Chancellor. He's probably familiar with your arguments, and he still says, are you two really the best we've got to be the next Prime Minister of our great country? Now, polling does suggest that there's no great enthusiasm for either of you. Do you recognise that? Do you hear it on the campaign trail? Are you aware of that?
Michelle, that's what I said. I said to Rob, I recognise his frustrations.
It's more personal than that, isn't it? He's talking about both of you.
But there's a choice for everyone, right? There's a choice for everyone, right? Keir Starmer talks about change. You don't get change unless you've got a plan to deliver change. Just saying it isn't going to bring about any change. And as you've heard tonight, there's no plan to cut your taxes, no plan to reform the welfare bill, no plan to deal with illegal migration, right? That's the reality of it. Yes, there will be change. It won't be change you like. It will be change when your taxes are going up, when we've become the soft touch of Europe for illegal migrants, when pensioners are paying tax for the first time. That's the change that is coming. So don't surrender to that, because your families are going to pay the price.
I think this question of enthusiasm is really important that you put to us, because I'm not surprised that after 14 years of this, people feel that the hope's been beaten out of them, because the country is in such a state. They've had loads of promises made to them at the last election about what would happen, which haven't been delivered on. That does beat the hope out of people. The very first question was about integrity in politics. And again, people haven't seen that integrity. You've had Partygate, you've had the breach of COVID rules, you've had the contracts for COVID, the instinct of some people to think the first thing in COVID I'm going to do is try to make money. Same with the Gambling Commission nonsense over the last few weeks. So this is an opportunity to restore that hope. I don't think we can do that by making sort of grand promises of things that can't be delivered. I think it's the ordinary hope of working people. My family was working class. The ordinary hope of getting on yourself, getting on for your family, getting on for your community, and getting on for your country. It has to be rooted, if we're going to restore hope, in my view, in returning politics to service. The sense that you come into politics to serve.
On that note, our next question, which is from Rachel Webster.
Good evening. How can I ensure that if I vote for either of you two men, you'll put women's interests first?
Keir Starmer.
Thank you very much for that question. I have in my team, as partners with me, very, very good, strong women that will deliver for the country. Rachel Reeves would be the first woman Chancellor if we're elected into government. She worked, as you know, in the Bank of England and is very, very keen and strong on the fiscal rules and what we need to do for our economy. I've got Angela Rayner, my deputy, who, again, has an incredible background, coming from a difficult background, where was a care worker for many years and now deputy leader of my party. And I'm very proud of her, and these people, and there are plenty of others, Yvette Cooper, Bridget Phillipson, you name it, really good, strong women who'll be part of my team. I think that leadership is about empowering your team and making sure it's a team on the pitch that are all batting and working together, and that's the way I lead, not suggesting for a moment that I'm the one with all the answers, but knowing that if I lead my team and bring my team into this, and we work as a team and will serve as a team, if we get the opportunity to do so, I will do it with some really fantastic, wonderful women who have been on this journey for me for 4.5 years, changing our party to put it before the country with that, essential principle, country first, party second.
Rishi Sunak, how would you ensure you'd put women's interests first?
Yeah, so I didn't catch...
Rachel.
Rachel. Probably the easiest thing I can tell you is that I have 2 young daughters. And that's why you can trust me, because as a dad, first and foremost, rather than a politician or prime minister, I want them to grow up in a country which is safe for them when they become teenagers and can walk around on their own. Making sure that we have the right police on the streets, that our communities are safe for women and girls is really important to me. I want to make sure that they have the health that they need, and that's why we've been making changes to things like HRT and maternity care in hospitals. But I also want to make sure that when they grow up and have jobs and start a family, that they're supported too, which is why we're rolling out 30 hours of free childcare for every working parent from the time that their little one is 9 months old to when the toddler goes off to school at 4 years, and that will make a big difference to families up and down the country. But that's why I said, so I can go into lots more policies, but I want my girls to grow up in a country where the sky is the limit for their ambitions. There is nothing that they can't do because they're women, and that's the kind of place that I believe in.
I'm going to bring in a related question, because this came to us via the BBC's Your Voice, Your Vote website. It was from Vicky in Oxfordshire, who asks this: will you protect women's right to single-sex spaces from any and all males, regardless of if they hold a GRC, a gender recognition certificate? Rishi Sunak?
Yeah, yes, unequivocally. And we will do that by changing the law so that the Equalities Act recognises that sex means biological sex, and that will allow us to deliver on what Vicky wants, which is to protect female-only spaces, female-only services. It's crystal clear for you there is a choice on that question at this election, because Keir Starmer is not matched my pledge to reform the Equalities Act to pass new law. That is the only way to deliver on what Vicky says. And the reason he won't do that, I don't know, but he can explain, is because he's not sure, like I am, that when it comes to these matters, sex means biological sex, and that's how you protect female-only spaces and services.
Keir Starmer?
Yes is the answer to the question. It's very important that we protect women's spaces. I saw this firsthand when I was Chief Prosecutor back in 2008 to 2013. I was working with groups who were supportive of women who'd been subjected to domestic violence and sexual violence, and saw for myself just how important it is to have those women's spaces. Same in hospitals and in sport. So yes to that answer. But what I will also say is that I do recognise that there are a small number of people who are born into a gender that they don't identify with, and I will treat them, as I treat all human beings, with dignity and respect. And I'll tell you for why. I'll tell you for why. Because if you don't, you end up with the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom standing in Parliament making an anti-trans joke in front of the mother of a murdered trans teenager. I will never, ever allow myself to be put into that position.
Rishi Sunak, would you like to respond to that?
That's not what I did. I was pointing out that you've changed your mind on this question multiple times. But to answer Vicky's question, you can't deliver on what Vicky wants. So everyone who does want female spaces protected has to be prepared to change the laws that the Equalities Act recognises that sex means biological sex. It's pretty straightforward. Now, Keir Starmer says that he believes in that, but he won't change the law to do it. So he's not being straight with you again. Right? Saying one thing and doing another. You won't change the law to recognise that sex means biological sex, so you cannot say to Vicky and everyone else who cares about this issue that you will actually ensure that their spaces are protected.
If he'd been in as many support centres that I've been in for those that have survived sexual violence and domestic violence, he would know very well it is possible to do it. It is being done. I've supported it being done when I was Chief Prosecutor. I've always believed in that principle of women's spaces. That's going back to 2008, way before this latest iteration of the debate, because I could recognise for myself just how important it was to have that space, women-only space, biological women-only space, particularly in that area, but also in other areas.
How do you ensure it? Just a second. Yeah. I mean, Rishi, how do you ensure it without changing the Equalities Act?
It's provided for under the Equality Act. It is actually spelt out as one of the examples given in the Act. It always has been. And fabricating a difference here in a situation where actually we should be trying to find common ground and work together. Well, I'm proud of the record of my party on women's rights. We've done amazing things in terms of equality under Labour governments, made a massive difference to millions of lives. There's much more work to do on women's equality going forward. But the only way I think we can make that progress is if we change the way that we do politics, stop this business of always trying to divide everybody, and actually use the opportunity of leadership, which is what I would do, to say the job of the leader of the country is to bring people together. These are difficult discussions, different opinions, of course, but the role of the leader of the country is to bring that together so that the country itself is less divided. And one of the issues for me is with sadness, is the fact that over the last 14 years, there's been this tendency on almost every issue to try to find the points of difference and division, rather than doing what we're actually really good at as a country, which is bringing people together.
Before we move on.
This is about the courage of your convictions and principles, right? I believe when it comes to these matters, sex means biological sex. Of course we should have compassion and tolerance for people who are going through questioning that, but fundamentally, when it comes to women's safety, women's only spaces, sex means biological sex for me. That is the only way to make sure you can deliver the protections that Vicky wants. And on this question, Keir Starmer, when one of his own female MPs made that point a while ago, he said that she was wrong. She was hounded, right? He said she was wrong. Now, he's now changed his mind on that question, that it goes back to trust, it goes back to having the courage of your convictions. I get that not all of you will agree with my position, right? But I'm being clear with you. Sex means biological sex. You have to change the Equalities Act to deliver the security of women's spaces and women's services. That's what I believe the right thing for our country is.
Can you respond to that point,
agree with that,
which relates to one of your MPs, Rosie Duffield?
The Prime Minister knows perfectly well that this is all set out in the Equalities Act already. The specific instance of safe space, it's set out. Read the legislation. Look at the notes under the legislation. It's been there for years. Don't just use this as a political football to try to divide people across the country.
Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll move on to our next question, and this one is from Julie Waters.
Good evening, James. I own a jazz vinyl record business with my partner. Post-Brexit, we have lost 90% of our business with Europe. How can we mend our broken trading relationship with Europe?
Okay. 90% of Julie's business with Europe has been lost. Now, Keir Starmer, you were a Remainer. Rishi Sunak, you argued and voted for leave. How can we mend our broken trading relationship with Europe?
Well, Julie, first of all, thank you for doing what you do. My mum was also a small business owner. I grew up in a family that had a family business. I know how hard it is. I know what the struggles are like, and our economy is built on people like you. And you deserve all our support and admiration and praise for doing what you are doing. I'm sorry things have been difficult. Right? We had the referendum, and now focus should be on making sure we make the best of all the opportunities. In an economy-wide sense, we're actually doing very well now. We're exporting around the world. But in order to help you, I have two specific things that I can do that will help. One of them is to make sure that we cut your taxes on business rates. When I talk to small retailers like yours, I think you said you had a premises. The thing that everyone talks to me about is business rates. That's why we've cut business rates for small retail, restaurants, pubs, shops across the country. And Labour on Wales, they haven't done that.
Julie's
so everyone's taxes are going up.
And then about mending the trading relationship.
And the second thing we'll do for you, for all those people like you who are self-employed and others in small businesses, I want to abolish your national insurance so that you have more financial security. Now, I'm the person that has made sure that we have good relations with Europe. You can all see that, and we will continue to do so. But the best way I can help your small business and the hundreds of thousands of others like yours is to continue to cut your taxes, because that's how we'll give you financial security. That's the choice for you at this election.
He says he's going to cut national insurance. That's £46 billion. £46 billion has just been spent in the last minute without saying where that money's coming from. That money on national insurance is used for our NHS and for our pensions. So, Prime Minister, if you're going to cut that money, that national insurance, those £46 billion, is it the NHS or is our pensioners that are going to pay for it?
So far, neither of you have answered Julie's question, which is about how we can mend our broken trading relationship with Europe.
Let me address that, because the Prime Minister says, I think he's just said the economy is all very well, going very well. I don't think millions of people across the country feel it's going very well. I think they think it's going very badly, and it's hitting them. But Julie, in relation to the EU, I did vote to remain. I campaigned to remain, but we left. We've left the EU. We're not going back to the EU. But I do not accept that we can't get a better deal than the one that we've got, because too many businesses are in the position you're in, which is, you know, you put yourself into your business, you put your money into your business, you take huge risks for your business, and I think you should be supported. So we want to arrange to get a better deal in trade relations with the EU. I think Boris Johnson botched it. He just wanted to say he could get a deal across the line. So we can get a better deal. I think a trading deal. I'd also like a better deal on research and development, where I think if we work together, it would be better for the country, and a better deal when it comes to security and defence, particularly in light of what's happened in Ukraine.
The key thing for Julie is the trade part. So I want to ask Rishi Sunak,
could
we get a better... Sorry, I'm just going to go back to the question. Could we get a better trading deal with Europe?
You know what? You might be able to. But do you know what the price of it will be? It will be free movement of people. And that's what Keir Starmer's not being straight with you about, right? They might be able to sit down with the EU, and the price of anything, and I know because I've sat across them for the last 18 months, negotiated the Windsor framework for Northern Ireland, actually got us into the Horizon programme for R&D. All the things he's talking about involve accepting more migrants. Free movement by the back door. That is the choice for you at this election. Right? If you want free movement to come back, we had Steve's question at the beginning about borders and migration. Right? That is the price of any deal like that with the EU. They have been crystal clear about that. So if you want high migration, fair enough. I don't think that's right. I want to bring the levels of migration down. I will not do any deal with the EU that increases migration when we had a referendum, and that is what I will deliver for you, not more open borders and free movement.
There is a give and a take when you reach deals like this, and perhaps the EU will ask for freedom of movement in return for what you want.
We are not going back into the EU. We're not rejoining the single market or the customs union, but we're not accepting freedom of movement. But I'm not a
defeat. Will you accept more migration in any form?
Please, let me finish answering the question. I'm not a defeatist like the Prime Minister who says to Julie, bad luck. That's as good as it gets. You'll have to go along with the problems you've got, however hard that is for you. I'm not in that. I'm not going to say to you, Julie, there's nothing I can do to help you, or to other people in the same position. I'm going to say, I know we can get a better deal than the botched deal that we've got, and I'm going to go out and fight for it. Not going to have freedom of movement come back, not going to go back into the EU, but I'm going to fight for a better deal so you can trade more easily across Europe, so you can succeed and our economy can succeed, because I believe in our country.
So in the 18 months I've had the job, I've negotiated with the EU for the Windsor framework, restored the government in Northern Ireland and strengthened our union, made sure that we are part of the Horizon scheme on positive terms, warmly welcomed by the entire research community or universities. I've got a track record of doing those deals with the EU, but you just say you'll get a deal. What will it cost? You're not being straight with people. I know. What it will cost is more migration. He's not being straight with you. You think you just magic some good thing for us and they won't want something in return, right? It's just, again, you're taking people for fools. They've been crystal clear. The price of any of those things is greater migration. It is fundamental to how they think about it.
If you were the Prime Minister, you would have to give something in return for the kind of deal you want with Europe.
Yes, but I think it's very important when you start those negotiations, you're very clear the lines you won't cross. And I've just set out the lines that I won't cross. But I'm not a defeatist like the Prime Minister. And nor will I say to Julie, I won't insult Julie by saying it's all fine, everything's working, everything's great. Part of the problem we have with this Prime Minister is that his lived world is millions of miles away from the lived worlds of individuals across the country, the businesses and the families that they're trying to support. There's a massive gap. That is a problem.
But again, you just won't rule out. Will you accept any greater migration as the price of a deal with the EU? Yes or no?
No, I don't. But I would say this, that migration, lawful migration, is at record numbers under this Prime Minister. He's actually the most liberal Prime Minister we've ever had when it comes to immigration. The numbers have gone through the roof. They're actually far higher than they were when we were in the EU. So I really don't think you can start lecturing other people about higher migration. They've never been as high as they are on your watch.
Yeah, what I can do is point out the choice for everyone at this election. This year, because of the actions I've taken, the number of visas we've issued is down by 30%. Net migration is forecast to halve in just the next 12 months because of the measures I've taken, because it was too high. But I've been Prime Minister for 18 months, now it's coming down sharply. Right? That's a progress we'll continue if I'm your Prime Minister, and we'll have a legal cap in Parliament to guarantee the numbers keep falling after that. Now, if Keir Starmer's your Prime Minister, you won't get any of that, because he opposes those changes. He won't have a legal cap on migration, and it will go up. Right, so that's the choice for you on legal migration. Continue the progress we've made under me. It's forecast to halve, legal cap in Parliament, or open borders. Surrender your borders to the Labour Party.
He's making it up as he goes along.
And in here...
Actually, hang on.
Our next question... No, I'm going to the next question.
You get BBC verified to check.
I'm going to the next question.
Just get BBC verified to check that. That's no problem.
They're already at work. Our next question is from Tasneem Zahra.
It feels like universities in the UK are churning out students year on year.
Yeah, just start again, because we didn't hear the beginning. Just start your question again.
I'm in my 20s, and it feels like universities in the UK are churning out students year on year. Young people like myself have lost hope for if they will ever get a good job or buy a home. Many of my peers are leaving the UK and going to countries like Australia or Dubai. What would you do to make me stay in the UK?
Thank you, Tasneem. And this is going to be the last question and set of answers. Keir Starmer, what would you do to make Tasneem stay in the UK?
Ensure that we've got good, well-paid, skilled jobs here for you and other young people who I do think have been let down in recent years of government, and make sure that we build the houses necessary to ensure that the dream of home ownership lives again, because at the moment it's been killed under this government. The average age for young people to get a house is in their 30s now. I think it should be in the 20s, and if we have 5 more years of this government, it'll go up to the 40s. But we've got to build more houses, 1.5 million houses across the country. That means tough decisions about planning and where those houses are going to be, but we also need to deal with the very high rents that young people are often paying. So many say to me, I'm paying more in rent than I'd actually pay on a mortgage, a huge proportion, but I can't save for the mortgage deposit that I need. And that's why we will have a low mortgage deposit scheme in place to allow young people, first-time buyers, to get on the housing ladder. But we've got to build the houses, 1.5 million houses. The Prime Minister's taken down the targets for house building. They're going off a cliff, sinking, and that is taking down with it your dreams and the dreams of young people across the country who can't get the job that they want. Very often, if they've been to college or university, are returning back home. We have to give them the future that they deserve. That means that we have to go out with our manifesto for growth, for wealth creation, and seize the opportunities of the future. Other countries are doing this. I think we should be in the race for the jobs for the future. I think we could win that race, but also roll up our sleeves, start building the houses that are necessary to make sure that you can afford to buy a house in your 20s, not as it currently is in your 30s. That's the tragedy of the last 10 years. And it'll simply go up if we have 5 more years of the current government.
OK, Rishi Sunak, Tasneem's question.
Everyone who's had the opportunity to own their own home remembers what it feels like when you get the keys to your first flat, and it's an incredibly special feeling. I believe in a country where all young people can aspire to that and realise that ambition. It's a very special thing. I know it's too hard. Of course, it's become too hard to buy your own home. I've got 2 very practical, specific things that we will do if I'm your Prime Minister, which will help make it easier. The first is to reintroduce a new form of Help to Buy. You may remember this. It means that you won't have to save for the entire deposit, just 5%, and then you'll be able to get a Help to Buy loan from the government, which covers another 20%. So that potentially can save you tens of thousands of pounds. And the second thing that we will do is effectively abolish stamp duty for first-time buyers. For the vast, vast majority of first-time buyers, we will abolish stamp duty. Right? Those are 2 very practical things that will save you thousands of pounds. Now, the reason that's important is when I talk to people like you, the most important thing they tell me is, how can you help me with the deposit? Because actually, I'm probably OK and into a decent job, and I can probably afford the mortgage. Right, actually similar to my rent, but what I can't do is save up for the deposit in time.
Tasneem's question was also about jobs, that young people have lost hope about ever getting a good job.
And by doing Help to Buy and abolishing stamp duty, we will massively be able to speed up how quickly you can get on the housing ladder and fulfil that dream of owning your own home. I think it's incredibly important. And as I said, I don't want to give you waffle, 2 very specific things: Help to Buy, abolish stamp duty, neither backed by Keir Starmer and the Labour Party. So again, there's a very clear choice for you, because if he's your Prime Minister, stamp duty for first-time buyers is going up. Right? That's what the plans are. If he's your Prime Minister, stamp duty... Again, we're back to the welfare debate. I'm happy to have that again. You don't think there's a penny to be made from welfare savings? I do, but there we go. The stamp duty and first-time buyer relief for you, Help to Buy, help you get on the housing ladder. That's a choice for you.
The Chancellor says the money's been spent. It isn't there. Prime Minister. The money isn't there. The Chancellor, not me, your Chancellor said
No,
the
that's
money's
not what he
been
said
spent.
at all.
You can't fund things from nothing. The money has been spent. And this is why, if we go on for another 5 years like this, we're going to end up exactly where we are now or in a worse place.
Yeah,
we have to turn the page
like Birmingham
and start,
Council, which are bankrupt and everyone's
rebuilding
taxes have
our
been hiked
country.
up.
And that means building those 1.5 million houses, and that's what we're determined to do with a strong plan behind it, already talking to the partners who will build those houses with us, because I'm absolutely determined that every single young person in this country under a Labour government will feel that the future is better for them. For my parents, it comforted them, even though they had tough times as parents. They didn't have a lot of money, but the thought, the idea that it would be better for their children comforted them and made their lives worthwhile. We've lost that, and we have to get it back, because in the end, the future is about our children and young people. We have to build a country, rebuild a country that is fit for them to live in and to absolutely realise all of their aspirations and their dreams. And I'm determined that we will do that.
Right, so. Tasneem, your question is fundamentally the reason I got into politics. Right? My grandparents emigrated to this country with very little. 2 generations later, I have the enormous privilege of standing here as your Prime Minister. I don't think my story would be possible in any other country, and that's why I feel an enormous sense of duty and gratitude to our country for what it's done for me. And I'm in politics to make a difference, to make people's lives better. And that starts with young people, making sure you have the opportunities you need to succeed in life, whatever you want to do, wherever you live. That's a type of country I believe in. And when you get that job, when you work hard, I want you to keep more of your hard-earned money, decide how to spend it for yourself. I believe in a society that's aspirational. That's why I want to cut your taxes. It's not just a technocratic thing, it's a type of country I believe in. It's one where your hard work is rewarded, your aspirations are supported, and that's what I'm in this to deliver for you, and that's what I will do as your Prime Minister.
We are just about out of time in here. That was the final question of the evening. In a moment, we're going to be joining Laura Kuenssberg and Clive Myrie over in the spin room for some more analysis. But before we leave you from here, Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer are going to have 30 seconds each to leave you with a final thought. And the order in which they will speak was decided earlier by a coin toss. First to speak is going to be Rishi Sunak.
I understand why you're frustrated with our party, with me. I get it. But this is not a by-election. It's a choice with profound consequences for you and our country. And before you make that choice, think what a Labour government would mean. Can you afford to pay at least £2,000 more in tax? And why won't Keir Starmer be straight with you about what he wants to do? And if you are not certain about Labour, don't surrender to them. Don't vote for any other party. Vote Conservative.
Rishi Sunak.
That is a lie.
Thank you
been
very
told
much.
not to repeat
And
that
this
lie, and
is-
he's just done it.
And this is your closing statement, Keir Starmer. Thank you.
My message to you is simple. If you want your NHS back, you have to vote for it. If you want a growing economy, you have to vote for it. If you want more police on our streets, more teachers in our schools, you have to vote for it. If you want to end 14 years of chaos and rebuild our country, then that power is in your hands. On July the 4th, vote change, vote Labour.
Thank you very much. And that brings to an end this last head-to-head debate of the election campaign. Thank you very much to our audience, especially to those who asked questions, but you've all been a really important part of this. And thank you also to the 2 contenders for Prime Minister. This is the last time you're scheduled to appear together in this way and to answer questions in this way. So we are grateful to both of you for taking part. Thank you very much.
The 2 men there, so Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, shaking hands with our colleague Mishal Husain after an hour and 15 minutes of clashes and claims.
And what a spiky debate it was. Very spiky indeed. Thanks to Mishal, of course, as well. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer there. They've had their say here in the spin room. Their supporters will be vying to make their claim that their man was the winner.
So in the next half hour, politicians and journalists will tell us, was it dazzling or disaster? And most important, of course, remember, Robert and Tasneem, two of the questioners from the audience, will be with us too. We'll find out if they thought the answers from the two men were good enough.
Yeah, and we'll be checking out some of the claims that were made by both men. But first, before all that, we're in the spin room. Laura, you have frequented many of these establishments, shall we say, over time. How did that go, do you think?
Well, it was very intense. It was very spiky, as you said. You could tell that both men know that the time is now. This is when the country, millions of people are tuning in to find out what they stand for, and those undecided voters are starting to think what they're going to do when they get into the polling booth. There were two words in particular that both men kept coming back to. Rishi Sunak, I think for the first time in this campaign, kept using the word surrender. Surrender, don't surrender the borders, don't surrender your finances. He even used that word in his closing statement. His whole thrust, a very aggressive warning to voters watching about what Labour would look like. Keir Starmer's favourite phrase seemed to be 14 years, 14 years, 14 years, consistently trying to remind people watching of the Conservatives' record. So those two very clear bits of messaging coming from both men in a very, very intense debate. But I think a lot of people watching at home might feel that the moment of the night was from one of our questioners who stood up and said, putting both of them on the spot, are you really the best that we can do?
Yeah, and that's Robert, and we're going to have him. But at the end of the day, do you think the dial will have moved when it comes to the polls or whatever with 7 days to go?
Well, it is very late for the Conservatives to make a recovery. They've been behind for months in the run-up to the election, and the polls haven't really budged very much at all. So Rishi Sunak is definitely on the back foot. Yeah. But we saw a much punchier Rishi Sunak tonight. And I wonder if some of our viewers, some of you at home and some Conservatives will be thinking, where was that fighter in the last few weeks? There's no question we saw him being very more aggressive. We can see Keir Starmer leaving the debate, I think, tonight. There he is, leaving the venue here in Nottingham after a very, very intense an hour and 15 minutes. Right then, I want to show you where we are. So this is the spin room where the parties are beginning to busily trying to claim victory. Let me show you around because it gets pretty crazy in here. We've got journalists from all the other broadcasters, our print colleagues here. And let me show you, this is what happens. So in the middle of that scrum is Pat McFadden. Oh, the Health Secretary Victoria Atkins has just bumped into me. We're live on BBC One. You're live on BBC One. A very brief word. We're going to talk to your colleague in a second, but you chipper or not?
I thought Rishi showed his plan for the future, but also the very serious choice we will make as a country next week.
Okay.
We must not surrender.
Okay, we're going to talk to the Home Secretary in just a minute, but I couldn't resist grabbing a word. Now, this is what happens. There's the Labour Party, some of their top team, Pat McFadden, their campaign chief, Jonathan Ashworth, one of his colleagues, and Labour's press team there. And I just want to show you around the other side. This is what happens behind the scenes in journalism. All our broadcast colleagues on air as this argument is far from over. So the two main men have an hour and 15 minutes on the stage fighting it out as they very much did tonight, but it is not all over bar the shouting, because now the contest to claim victory really gets underway. Clive.
All right, thank you for that little tour of the environment here, and I'm pleased to say that our two guests, audience members who ask questions, have just joined us. Robert Blackstone, Tasneem Zahara, thank you so much. First of all, Robert, your question brought gasps. Is this the best we've got to choose from? That was your question. And what was the response? Were you, I don't know, did you think that perhaps things improved as a result of what you heard?
No.
No?
No, I was disappointed with the response from both Rishi and Sir Keir. Neither of them seemed to want to say why they were good, if that makes any sense. They were sort of going on what they'd done in the past. They weren't saying that they weren't being positive. From a Prime Minister, from my perspective, we want a personality. We want somebody that we can recognise. We want somebody on the world stage that is going to project our great Britain. Right. That's what we want.
Yeah, well, Tasneem, I mean, you were talking about possibly leaving the country. You know, what could these two leaders tell you to make you feel, unlike your friends who've already left, that you have a future here in this country?
I really wanted them to mention the quality of life that's in the UK versus other countries. Why are young people leaving the UK to other countries like the UAE, like Australia? It is the quality of life here. It's detrimental here. It is the cost of houses and trying to get onto the property ladder without parental help. Because a lot of young people do not have parental help, and that's just the facts. They didn't mention about how can I, as a young person, feel confident that I will get a very good, well-paying job with my skill set. The unemployment rates for grads is astronomical now, and universities are churning out graduates year on year, but firms and companies, they're cutting their headcount, and university graduates are left, with almost like a depression. It's very hard to find a job now. So I really wanted them to touch on the quality of life and the jobs. Yes, Rishi Sunak said that he will implement a 5% deposit with a loan that we can get from the government for 20%. But that's another loan. They didn't say anything about reducing the cost of houses. They didn't say anything about our quality of life here. So I didn't really feel confident with their answers, neither of them.
Okay, back to you, Robert, because you're a long-time Conservative voter.
Yes, yes.
And I'm just wondering how you're feeling now with 7 days to go before you've got to make the big decision.
Still undecided, I'm afraid.
You're one of the undecideds.
I am, very much so, yes. And tonight, in fairness to both the politicians that we've seen, they haven't made me decide one way or the other. I worry about things that haven't been talked about. I worry about inheritance tax.
Right.
I worry about council banding. I worry about fuel duty. We're being pushed down, or I say being pushed, we're being persuaded to go down the electric vehicle route. Fuel duty provides a huge revenue to the Treasury. How are they going to replace that?
All right. Okay, and Tasneem, what about you? 7 days to go. How are you feeling, you one way or the other, in terms of where you may cast your vote?
Before coming here, I kind of had my mind set on which way I'm inclining towards. However, neither party is really enticing to me. Although Rishi Sunak might have enticing incentives for young people, like reducing the stamp duty and so on, after the last 14 years of flimsy promises and empty promises, how am I to tell that there will be results out of these promises? I can't. There's no results. There hasn't been any results since the last 14 years. So, although I may not agree entirely with either leader, I'll have to make a strategic vote.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Tasneem, Richard, thank you. Robert, thank you so much for that. Now, Laura, who's with you here in the spin room?
Well, we'd already bumped into the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, didn't we? But with me now is the Home Secretary, James Cleverly, and Wes Streeting for Labour, who wants to be the Health Secretary in about 8 days' time now. Firstly to you, Wes Streeting, you're a man to be in the front runner in this race, but he was a bit on the back foot tonight, wasn't he?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the Prime Minister was very shouty, interrupty, and not very Prime Ministerial. But if Keir got across the fundamental argument, which is, with a week to go now, this election is not decided. People only get change if they vote for it. And it's very clear from Rishi Sunak's performance, if we have 5 more years of the Conservatives, nothing will change. In fact, if there is any change, it will be certainly change for the worse. Whenever he was pressed on how he funds his policies, he wasn't able to answer the questions thrown up by his own Chancellor today of the enormous black hole in their own spending plans. I mean, this is Liz Truss on steroids, and that's the big risk of 5 more years of Conservative chaos, division and incompetence.
James, you're shaking your head there.
Well, he wasn't going to agree.
So what we saw from Keir Starmer was someone who's very, very fragile when actually pushed to answer the questions. He talked over Mishal, he talked over Rishi, he talked over the audience, which is why Rishi really had to assert himself. But what we saw over and over again was Starmer failing to answer the questions, failing to answer what it means to be a woman, failing to answer what he would do with asylum seekers from countries you can't return.
I think our audience knows that actually they were both interrupting a lot, and it looked to me like Rishi Sunak had a new deliberate target, which was just hammer away, and he kept using the word surrender. And he was accusing Labour of wanting to surrender people's finances, surrender the welfare system, surrender the borders. That's very emotive, isn't it? Are you comfortable with that kind of language?
Well, this election is about a choice. And what we have seen, and we saw it today in that leaked audio of a secret plan. So the figures that Labour are putting in the public domain, and the person who's going to be number 2 at the Treasury if Labour form a government basically said, oh, we're talking about 28 million, but that's tiny. And we're only talking about 28 million because the media are putting her under pressure. The actual figure is hundreds of millions. There is a massive black hole which will inevitably mean tax will go up. And when the PM pushed Keir Starmer on whether he refused to put up taxes, Keir Starmer would not commit to anything that was even hinting.
Okay,
All right,
well, Clive's joined me over here, but we've got to Wes Streetham is rolling his eyes, so we've just got to let him briefly answer that point.
I've just been talking to 2 of the audience members, okay? And they both say that they're not impressed with the offering that has been made this evening. Principally, certainly in terms of Rishi Sunak, there's a sense that there have been so many problems over the last 14 years, but also uncertainty about where the country would be heading if Keir Starmer was the Prime Minister. How do you deal with that sense that there is an apathy and a loss of trust in politics in this country? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so let me come back to James and then answer your question, Clive. So what that audio recording of Darren Jones was about was the cost of getting our entire economy to net zero by 2050. So the idea, and people have seen the hard choices we've made this side of the election to make sure our manifesto is a manifesto that's fully costed, fully funded, promises we can keep and promises the country can afford. And that has meant taking some tough decisions and saying to some people on our own side, look, the state of the public finances mean we're not going to be able to do as much as we would have liked to do as fast as we can, because the most important thing is that, as Liz Truss showed, you've got to make sure you've got a responsible approach to the economy, otherwise everyone's left paying a really high price. And it goes to this point, Clive, on trust. Like, I know that there is a total lack of trust in politics and politicians at the moment, and even, you know, with the events this week, I know there's a bit of a sort of a plague on all your houses that sort of people take away from this. It's a bad place for a democracy if people think that voting doesn't change anything. And I'd say to people, let's just reflect on since 2016. I voted Remain. I was disappointed with the outcome of that referendum. But there's no doubt that voting really changed something quite fundamental about our country's direction. 2017 and 2019, those were hugely consequential general elections. I'd argue for the worse, of course. But voting does matter. Voting does change anything. And I'd say about the NHS, we delivered the shortest waiting times and the highest patient satisfaction ever. Look at what the Conservatives have done since. And
there's
voting doesn't change.
There is a lack of confidence in Keir Starmer from some of the people in that audience.
What I'd say about Keir Starmer, this is a guy who gripped the Labour Party from the ashes of defeat in 2019 and has fundamentally changed it. And that was hard. And it took steel. And he's got what it takes, having changed the Labour Party, to change our country if people give him that chance by voting
James,
to change.
just briefly, do you think anything will have changed
Rishi Sunak, since becoming Prime Minister, has got inflation down, he's got the economy growing, he's got wages increasing, and we are cutting taxes. So that is his personal track record. I think one of the reasons why so many people, I get this on the doorstep all the time, really uncomfortable with the idea of a Keir Starmer-led government is because they don't know what he stood for. He used to stand for Corbyn, then he says he doesn't stand for Corbyn. He used to say that taxes didn't need to go up. We now know that taxes are going to go up.
Okay.
They don't know what they get, and that's why they can't take the risk, because they don't want to reverse the economic growth.
Okay,
they don't want to reverse
and
these
you've both
tax
had your
cuts, and
chance
we
of
don't want to reverse
campaigning a
that
bit
reduction
on the
in
television
inflation.
to our voters, but we're very, very short on time tonight. I want a quick word. I mean it, a quick word.
Yeah, right.
8 days to go. What are you looking forward to? Quickly, Wes Streeting.
The end of this general election, I really hope that we get the chance to turn the page and deliver the change our country needs.
Okay,
but we're not
James,
taking anything for granted.
James Cleverly, briefly.
Well, we want to continue the work that we've done, bringing down inflation, increasing wages, getting more people into employment, protect British people from what we see in Wales, which is waiting lists longer than in England, Labour-run Wales, and Labour-run London, where crime levels are higher than the national average. We need to protect the British people from that. That's what we're campaigning for this election.
Both of you, thank you very much. You'll be
That was
shocked,
pretty
Clive.
quick, yeah.
Shocked, Clive,
Yeah, well,
that we got a bit of campaigning instead of a truly
surprise.
honest answer about the next 7 days. But the two men on stage tonight were the only people who can become Prime Minister next week. But you know, we know, they're not the only ones in this big race.
Yeah, the BBC has already hosted a debate with the 7 biggest parties in Britain, and politicians from 2 of those parties join us now. In a moment, we're going to be
join us
talking
now.
to
We told you
Daisy
this
Cooper from the Liberal Democrats.
And first, though, as we try to get out of the way, spin rooms can be a bit chaotic. We're going to have a chat to Keith Brown, the Deputy Leader of the SNP. Thanks for joining us alongside Daisy here. Keith, what did you make of what you saw tonight?
I think for viewers in Scotland, they'll see how completely irrelevant Scotland is, either to the Labour Party, the Tory Party, or indeed the BBC being squeezed out of this debate tonight. But also, over and above that, it was like a third-rate vaudeville act. The big things that should have been mentioned weren't mentioned. Scotland wasn't mentioned once. Brexit wasn't mentioned once, even in response to the question about the trade relationship with Europe. And austerity wasn't mentioned once. And for that reason, I think this selection, and I've been in elections for 40 years now, represents the biggest fraud on the people of the UK and in Scotland that I've ever seen.
A fraud?
Because they're not talking about what the IFS has said or what the Nuffield Trust has said, £18 billion of cuts. I guarantee whoever gets in, and the Tories will lose, but Conservatism will win. We'll have lower living standards at the end of the next Parliament. We'll still have austerity. We'll still be with Brexit if Labour and Tory want to do that. There's not going to be any change, but they're not saying that in this debate.
Well, we're just seeing Rishi Sunak leaving the venue here in Nottingham tonight after a pretty fiery conversation that happened here. But Keith, the fact is, though, that you have significant powers in Scotland, and there are still many viewers in Scotland tonight who are not convinced by what they've seen from the SNP in this campaign, and you have been struggling to maintain your position. Why is that happening?
Well, I think, of course, we have had 14 years of austerity. Of course, that's produced pressure on public services. But you saw Keir Starmer, for example, tonight say the reason why Labour councils were falling over was because of lack of government funding, although he then refused to rule out giving any more funding. The same applies in Scotland as it applies in Wales. So, of course, 14 years of austerity has an effect on public services. But we have a better track record in terms of housing, affordable housing, in terms of the NHS, in terms of many areas of public policy in Scotland. And also, we have tried to mitigate the 2-child cap, which Keir Starmer wants to keep. I couldn't believe tonight I heard a Labour possible Prime Minister attacking a Tory Prime Minister for being too liberal on immigration. It's absolutely irrelevant to the interests of the people of Scotland, what we've seen tonight. And Scotland does have a chance for a better future, which is to vote for independence.
OK, Keith Brown, thank you very much indeed. A good reminder, all sorts of different races going in all sorts of different parts of the UK.
Yeah, I mean, Daisy Cooper, you're with us. I just want to understand the tactic clearly from the leadership of your party has been to find a way to cut through. So you've had Ed Davey falling off a pedalo, you've had him on bicycles, you've had him all over the place. Has that actually worked in getting the public to listen to your messages on tax and spend, pensions, foreign policy, all the other important stuff? Has it actually worked?
Yes, I think it has. I think if you listen to the debate tonight, I think the gentleman in the audience who really hit the nail on the head was the gentleman who said, is this really the best that we've got? And actually what we've seen over the last few weeks is that many people have really made a human connection to Ed Davey, because he's demonstrated that we can make people laugh, we can make them cry, and that he has a real experience, a lifetime of experience as a family carer, and people up and down the country have made that real connection. And at a time,
but are they listening to your policies? Are they hearing the heavy stuff?
I think they really are, because every time we have one of these stunts, it comes with a very serious message. So when Ed was on the paddleboard in Windermere, he was talking about the Lib Dem plan to put an end to the scandal of raw sewage dumping. When he was at a water park, he was talking about the importance of mental health and our pledge to put mental health practitioners into every primary and secondary school. And of course, Ed has talked so passionately about social care time and time again. So yes, I do think people are hearing our messages, but of course, I would have loved to have seen Ed Davey on the stage this evening so he could have talked even more about our plans on the NHS.
OK, you've got 7 days to go now to get that message out. What are you going to do in that 7 days? How are you going to get your voice heard again?
I think you're going to see more of the same. We're going to see a lot of fun from our campaign, making that human connection with people, delivering our message on all sorts of pledges to do with our NHS, how we're going to save social care, how we're going to have real action on the cost of living, and how we protect our local environment. Right around the country, in many places, it's only the Liberal Democrats who can beat the Conservatives and deliver the change that the country are really crying out for. We'll get that message out there loud and clear over the next 7 days.
All right, Daisy Cooper, Keith Brown, thank you.
Thank you both very much. Well, Daisy said more fun to come. I wonder what he's going to do next. I didn't think there were any stunts left. Of course, Clive, the poll that matters is the one next Thursday that you will all take part in by putting your cross in a box. But at the BBC, we've been tracking all of the polls, and you can see them now. in terms of what's been happening in the polls, well, actually, during the campaign, nothing much. You can see there that there has been an uptick for reform.
Static,
Nigel Farage's party, and that is significant.
Yeah.
The Liberal Democrats are a little bit up, but broadly speaking, the big gap between the two big parties hasn't really budged, which of course is the stuff of Rishi Sunak's nightmares. We're joined now by Vicky Young, our Deputy Political Editor. Vicky, what did you make of tonight? I mean, is it going to change anything, do you think, in the polls we've just been looking at?
I think what's really interesting there, as you've said about the polls, if you didn't know anything about those polls and you watched that debate tonight, I think that you would know who was out there fighting and trying to make up lost ground. Because the Prime Minister came out there incredibly aggressively, probably too aggressive for some people watching. I've spoken to some of his team and they say that doesn't matter. He had his core message. He wanted to get it across. It seemed well rehearsed, those lines about surrendering borders, surrendering tax, surrendering your finances. I felt he was very much directing most of that message at people who are thinking of voting reform. They were the audience for him tonight. I think that seemed quite clear, didn't it?
Yes, it felt as if that was where his discussion was. It wasn't necessarily towards the Labour Party and trying to, it feels as if perhaps from the Conservative point of view, that's gone. That ship has sailed. It's about trying to nail down those voters who might decide that they're going to go to the right, to reform.
It plays into what the Conservatives are saying privately, a lot of them, which is this has become a damage limitation exercise. And I think on the flip side of that, if you look at Sir Keir Starmer, they're worried about complacency. So it does all go back to those polls. We know that there's been a few postal ballots gone in, but no other votes have been cast. But they do make a difference to people. And what they're worried about is people watching this who might like to vote Labour, but are thinking, well, I don't need to bother really because you're going to win by so much. That's the message the Tories are putting out there. And what Sir Keir Starmer's trying to do is say you won't get that change that you want unless you get out there and vote for it. And I think speaking to shadow cabinet members, that's the thing they're probably most worried about, is people who still haven't made up their mind this late in the day, and they're still really trying to persuade them. And you could hear that in that final message from Sir Keir Starmer.
I mean, it's one of the interesting things about this campaign. Actually, you watching tonight might feel you've already heard too much of it, frankly, but we know, don't we, that actually voters often, for a very good reason, only really tune in at the last moment. And both the parties think, despite all the politicking, there are still maybe millions of votes in play. A few days ago, Labour was even saying they think there's still 7 million votes in play, maybe around a quarter of people, and probably lots of people watching tonight. I just wonder, Vicky, when you talk to both camps, what do they think their best chances of answering the fears that you've just told us they have?
I think for the Conservatives, it's really fear of Labour they're trying to instill into those reform voters. They're trying to say to them, look, Labour will put up your taxes, Labour will mean that benefits are higher. All the things that maybe people who are thinking about Labour, who are, actually on the right of politics, are worried about. So they hope that they can really, limit the damage it might do in lots of seats. And as you say, just by peeling off more of those reform voters, they could save an awful lot of seats. And for Labour, they've got to inspire people. Is the change message enough? It's an incredibly powerful one. Of course it is, especially after a party's been in power for 14 years. But they want to get as many people out as possible. Of course they do. But they also don't want to put a foot wrong.
I wonder, Vicky, what you're looking for, expecting in the next 7 days, the final week of campaigning.
I just think everyone gets so nervous, don't they? And I think if you're a party that is this far ahead in the polls, as Labour do seem to be, you're probably going to withdraw into yourself a bit more, aren't you? You're probably going to get even more cautious. But at the same time, but also then trying to inspire people. They've really got a careful line to tread there. They've got to give people enough reason to get out there and vote, but they don't want to put foot wrong because they do feel they're pretty close, and they don't want to sound complacent.
One of the interesting things someone in the shadow cabinet told me today said, I'm sick with nerves. Sick with nerves. And you can see that. You can absolutely see that. But do you think that's part of the reason why Keir Starmer did appear to be on the back foot tonight? Now, he tried to challenge some of Rishi Sunak's claims more rapidly than he had and some of these other events. but he did feel like he was sort of the one crouching away a bit, where Rishi Sunak punching away every
had
opportunity.
to be on the front foot. If you're behind, you've got to lean forward.
Yeah,
You've got
I think
to lean
maybe
in.
I think Rishi Sunak in the first one was quite aggressive, even more so here. But yeah, you're right, Sir Keir Starmer. But maybe he's thinking, I need to look prime ministerial. I know a lot of people watching won't have liked the interruptions, the aggression, and Sir Keir Starmer a few times said, stop interrupting me, let me answer the question. You know, maybe he felt that for him, it's fine to sit back a little bit more. But he did, as you say, he pushed back a little bit more on the taxation accusations, didn't he?
Okay, Vicky Young, our Deputy Political Editor, thank you so much for joining us here in the
see you,
boiling hot spin room. The
My
temperature of the
jacket's
debate
off.
was pretty hot. I wondered if
jacket's
either of the
off and I'm
leaders might
sweating.
have... Well, that is it for tonight. 7 days to go. A week tomorrow. The power is in your hands.
Yeah, we're going to be there with you on the big night. Results night, 5 to 10. On the 4th of July on BBC One, ahead of the all-important exit poll, that nail-biting moment offering a first indication of who could be in number 10. We'll guide you through the night and the early hours as all the results come in.
So join us as your decisions about your MP, your Prime Minister and your election come in. See you then.
Bye-bye.
You ready for this?
BBC iPlayer. Love what you find. Find what you love. Binge watch brilliant shows.
I'm making the same mistakes over and